You're in for a treat as we dive into today's episode all about the fascinating world of trust, estate, and tax planning with guest expert attorney Lauren Klein. Whether you're just starting out or already have a plan in place, Lauren's insights will help you navigate common misconceptions, avoid costly mistakes, and make informed decisions for your future. Tune in and learn how to protect yourself and your loved ones. This is a must-listen episode you won't want to miss. Welcome to Wealthy After 40, where I help you turn retirement uncertainty into a clear, actionable plan. If you're thinking about retirement but feel unsure whether it's even possible, I understand. The gap between where you are now and where you want to be can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to. Hi, I'm Daylene Higgins, founder of Elevate Finances and your personal financial coach. Having retired at the age of 50 and have enjoyed over 2 years of retirement bliss, I'm here to help you create your retirement dream and make it a reality. No more wondering, no more guessing, just taking action and building a future for yourself. Join me each week as I guide you through essential topics such as budgeting, cash flow, lifestyle planning, debt and savings, insurance, Medicare, and Social Security. Together, we'll build a strategy to help you achieve the retirement you've always desired. It's time to shift from uncertain to unstoppable and make your retirement dreams a reality. Hey there, listeners. Retirement planning doesn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. I've got you covered with my free retirement readiness checklist, a step-by-step guide to building a solid financial plan for retirement. Whether you're focused on ditching debt, boosting your savings, or mapping out your retirement goals, this checklist will guide you with clear steps tailored to where you are, whether you're 2, 5, or even 10 years away from retirement. Grab it now down in the show notes or on my website, elevatefinances.us/retire now, and start your journey to a happy, stress-free retirement today. Welcome, Lauren. I'm so excited to chat with you today. Can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to specialize in trust, estate, and tax planning?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited for this conversation. So I'm a trust and estates attorney, meaning I focus on estate planning and kind of, going back in time to when I was an undergrad, kind of figuring out what I was going to do. I was actually a finance major. So I was planning on going down the finance track, but it was 2008, 2009, and we all know what was going on in the world then. And I was interning at, one of the big brokerage houses, and they said, "Hey, you might want to do something else for a little while." And I thought, well, I guess I'll go to law school, bide my time. I had always thought that maybe I would go at some point. Started law school, wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I just knew that it would be a great experience and help me to really understand how to read laws and, kind of understand contracts and things like that. I ended up taking a tax class of all things, and I really didn't want to take it, but the professor kind of pushed me into it and I fell in love. I absolutely love the tax code, which sounds crazy, but it just the way my brain works. So, finished law school, ended up getting what's known as an LLM in taxation. So it's a master's. So I'm a tax attorney that focuses on trusts and estates. And, started my career and really fell in love with law and with trusts and estates because, in both of our industries, we get to know the family and their businesses. And it's such a really, personal type of relationship. And I've been practicing now for 13 years and I really, really love what I do.
I'd love to hear how people pick a specialty and what clicks with them. Tax code is very interesting. I was encouraged by my mom, you can do it, you can learn it, and I did. All right, what common misconceptions do people have about trusts and estates planning? What are they getting hung up with? What is challenging them to take the step and get this done?
It's such a good question. And, within our firm, we're having this conversation day in and day out because there are a lot of misconceptions out there. And so when I started the firm that I currently own with my dear friend and my law partner, Flourish Law Group, about a year and a half ago, we decided, okay, when we do our consultations or presentations for the community or webinars, what are we going to focus on? And what are we going to really kind of peel back the curtain and say, here's what most people think. Is it accurate? So a lot of people think that you have to be, elderly to need an estate plan, or you have to be very, very wealthy to need an estate plan, things like that. Or, maybe it's just going to be too scary or too hard. And, just psychologically, we kind of tend to put it off and put it off. But the reality is, anyone who's 18 or over really should have something in place, whether it's a power of attorney to name someone to make healthcare or excuse me, financial or legal decisions on your behalf, or healthcare documents to say, hey, if I can't make a decision because I'm in surgery or I've been in an accident, who will make those decisions for me? Really, any adult needs to do that, even if you're going into college, because once you become an adult, your parents no longer have the ability to make those decisions for you. So those are some of the most common misconceptions, but we tell people start with the basics. And as your life grows and your wealth grows and you start, maybe getting married or having kids, then you can kind of, build from there. And for our clients, when we're meeting with them, we're often helping them figure out, do I need a will or do I need a will and a trust? And it's really dependent on that client's goals, their facts and circumstances. But most people think, wow, a trust. I don't have millions and millions of dollars. But if you have minor children, or if you want to put guardrails in place or avoid probate, a trust is one of the ways to really help with all of those things.
Yeah. And before we jumped on and recorded, I was sharing with you, like, I had that paperwork for my parents and nobody wanted to look at it. But you were just saying how, because I had that, because I had the trust account set up, like nobody was questioning anything. And so it made it very slick. I just want to say, yes, it needs to be there. It makes your life easier at a most difficult time. What are top three things that individuals or couples should consider when setting up a trust? Those over 40, those who, most likely have kids, maybe not, but they're older, they're, into their career, retirement's anywhere from probably 15 to 20 years away. What do they need to consider?
So for our clients who have minor children, we're thinking about, okay, what are we going to put in place? We always hope for the best, but we want to plan for the worst. So we say, okay, if something happened to me and my spouse, if I have one now, what would I want to happen? Who would I want to control the money? If something happened down the road, do I want to make sure that my children have guardrails in place, either if they get married and they get divorced, or, maybe they're 20 years old. Do we really want a 20-year-old inheriting assets? Probably not. We would want there to be guardrails in place and say, hey, maybe they can receive assets if they start a business or for, education purposes or things like that. Those are some of the things that we really start to talk about. And then making sure we go over with their financial advisor, if they have one, all of their assets and say, how are they owned? What type of asset is it? Is it real estate? Is it a retirement account, a brokerage account? How is it titled? Is it individually titled or jointly held? Do you have beneficiary designations on those accounts? Because that's a great way to avoid probate. And maybe, you're doing that in conjunction with a trust. Those are the things that we really start to think about with our clients and explore with them. And hopefully if they have a financial advisor, with their advisor, or if they don't, maybe we're recommending and connecting them with the right advisor. Because I think one of the other, kind of going back to the misconceptions, is that estate planning is kind of in a vacuum. But it really is just an extension of your financial planning. We work hard, we build businesses, we work hard at our jobs, and we don't really think about, wow, what happens if I become incapacitated, or what happens if I pass away? What's going to happen to those assets? Who are they going to go to? How is it going to get there? And is it going to get there in a way that does avoid probate, like we were just talking about? And really making sure that if you're near retirement age, you're thinking, if you have 401ks or IRAs or things like that, assets that might have, certain tax implications of how they're inherited, required minimum distributions. There's been a lot of changes in the laws recently. Making sure that we're really, focusing on all of that in a really holistic manner. Those are a lot of the things. And also, hey, if something happens to me and I can't make a healthcare decision for myself, who's going to do that? Or if I'm not able to, make a legal decision or a financial decision, even if I'm just not available, who's going to do that for me? And we always kind of talk about things like the power of attorney, where you can name someone to make, like I said earlier, financial or legal decisions. It's kind of like life insurance. When you need it, you can't get it. And so you don't want to wait until there's a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, mom has this bank account and now I can't do anything, or I can't pay her bills, or I can't contact her phone company, or just things like that that maybe people don't think about when they hear estate planning.
Yeah, so true. So, power of attorney for you have healthcare and then you have financial. Let's just talk like down that road. I know people probably get hung up on who do I choose? How do I choose? Does it matter? And kind of how you guide your clients through making those decisions to have that in place, because that is definitely needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big part of we have a whole meeting that we call our estate plan design meeting, where we look at their will and their trust and how they want it all to work and the ancillary documents. And we'll walk through with them. Okay, this is the document. This is, the powers that the agent, the trustee, the personal representative, the healthcare surrogate, the financial agent will hold. And talk about exactly what that looks like so they can kind of start to get their wheels turning on who would be the right person. Oftentimes when someone's married, they're naming their spouse, but not always. So sometimes that's kind of the easy question. And then it's like, okay, but if the spouse can't serve, then who are we going to have? Are we going to have children, adult children serving? Maybe if there's multiple children serving together, either acting, independently, or they must agree. If they have family friends or other family members, is that the right person to serve in that role? And really kind of drilling down on that and getting deep into their family dynamics and what they want to accomplish. And that's such a good question, because that really shows, the level of personalization that you would want your estate planning attorney to really give to you. So this is not cookie cutter. This is
Right.
very personal to each client.
Right. I know there's like I think there's a lot of belief that, oh, it has to be the oldest. I know that was my thinking. And I hear other people say, oh, I named my oldest. And my parents actually chose number 6 of 7. So, as people are, I know you say, definitely not cookie cutter. What are some considerations to think about just for somebody to dig deeper in themselves? What are questions that they could ask themselves, reflect on to start making that decision before they work with an estate planner?
I love that question. And I think it depends on each role. So let's say, parents are trying to decide who would be the guardian of our minor children if something happened, God forbid, when our kids are young.
Yeah.
Thinking about who has the value system that you would want, who has the financial and emotional ability to take over, really being their parent or their guardian, if an unexpected event occurred, or if it's a trustee who's able to understand, not necessarily complex, because you can always hire an attorney to help you through
Yeah.
the process if need be. But do you understand money? Do you understand, how it all works? And maybe even with clients, we'll say, why don't we, if you feel comfortable, talk to the people you've named as the successor trustee and explain to them what actually goes into that process and what things they might need to look out for. Will they understand, how to read the document? Will they follow your wishes? If it's either for you and you're incapacitated, or if it's a spouse, maybe they're their own trustee, or, children down the road. We also talk a lot about if you want children to be their own trustees of their own trusts in the future, at what age? Is it 25? Is it 30? And a lot of our clients have really young kids. Like I have a 3 and a 2-year-old. I have no idea who they're going to be. So we say, we meet with our clients every year free of charge, and we say, let's stay on top of that, because as the kids grow up, you'll start to figure out who they are and when they might be mature enough. And then if it's things like healthcare, who in the family maybe has a healthcare background, or maybe is more compassionate or able to have some of those more soft skills, or power of attorney. At least in Florida, it's different in different states. Our power of attorney is effective immediately for that first agent. So whoever I name as my first agent already has powers. You don't have to show that I'm incapacitated. So who do you really trust? Because that is a powerful document. They could technically move real estate or go into the bank or do really, big financial and legal decisions, make really big decisions. So who do you trust, to really have your best interests at heart?
I know it's different state to state, so people need to really learn what works within their state. So, how can estate planning help like manage and resolve financial gaps or debts? I know like when somebody passes young, maybe they still have lots of debt just because that's the timing of life. Like, how does that work? What does that look like? What should maybe be in a trust? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things when you sit down to do estate planning is it kind of forces you to look at all of your assets and kind of have a snapshot. And a lot of times it's like, oh, I forgot about that account, or this 401k or whatever it is. So that's like kind of the foundation and starting there. And it's just a good exercise. And if you have an advisor, having that advisor or even a CPA involved in that process, because they might be like, hey, remember this over here, you kind of forgot about that, or you already have a beneficiary designation. So that's a good way to kind of get started. And then, also looking at what your net worth is and what your assets and liabilities are, and say, okay, if something did happen to me when I was young, maybe I have a lot of debt. Maybe life insurance is a good option to make sure that if I do pass away young and unexpectedly, and there still is debt because I'm in, the career building phase of my life and the wealth accumulation phase of my life, making sure that there is sufficient insurance to account for those things. Maybe one spouse makes more money than the other spouse. And so kind of thinking about that in the process, or, maybe you have some money set aside for education for children, but at least at this stage, it wouldn't be sufficient. Having insurance or other, planning mechanisms in place can be really, really helpful. And then thinking about, trust planning for children, and I touched on a little bit before, but if you have assets staying in trust for those children, it can be really beneficial because it can help to create that generational wealth. It does protect, and at least in Florida, where I'm licensed, if there's an asset held in trust for the child, it becomes irrevocable when the grantor, the person who creates the trust, passes. So there's creditor protection. If you have a child who might be in a high liability profession, like say a dentist, there's protection, and that really does help to grow, the wealth. And then if there's an estate tax potentially. So right now in the US, anyone who's a US citizen or permanent resident can give away or die with about $13 million before you have to worry about estate and gift tax. And depending on in which state you reside, some states have state level estate tax as well. But thinking about that, and if assets stay in trust for kids, even if I say right now I don't have a taxable estate, but that exemption might go down at the end of next year to about 7 million a person. And who knows what the laws could be over the years. If those assets stay in trust for children, then it stays outside of their estate tax base. So it's another great way to create wealth for your family. And as you start to think about, hey, what assets might I want to put in the trust? And that's, that can get very personalized as well. It depends on the type of asset and how it's, whether it's a residence or an investment property and things like that. But walking through with an estate planning attorney, figuring out, okay, maybe I'm going to move a brokerage account that I own solely into my name, into my trust. And then my trust dictates what happens if my spouse survives me or if he predeceases me. And, if you're looking at, we kind of touched on the required minimum distributions, making sure you're not maybe restricting and causing, there to be a certain timeline that those distributions need to be made for spouses because there's been changes in the law and it might not be the most tax efficient way to do things. And sometimes we're not moving things into trust during life. We're naming a trust as a beneficiary. So for example, maybe you want assets to go outright to a spouse, but you would want them to stay in trust for children. So on certain assets, we might name the spouse as the primary beneficiary, and then our revocable trust as the contingent beneficiary. And then there's also irrevocable trust planning. So all the trusts I've been talking about so far are revocable trusts, meaning I can amend, I can restate. The IRS looks through the trust for tax purposes, so everything flows to my tax return. Creditors look through it, at least while I'm alive, and the trust is revocable, and it doesn't protect from that estate tax. But for clients who either have a taxable estate or could, there's other mechanisms, making completed gifts into irrevocable trusts or owning life insurance in a certain type of life insurance trust. There's a lot of things that you can do if you're kind of more in that high net worth bracket, or you could be down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. So important to think about. And I love how we started, like, you're like, just start with the basics, and then kind of go from there. And so if you're in your 20s, your 30s, you have one, And then in 40s, 50s, yeah, you're going to definitely be making more money or have accumulated more wealth. And it comes with different, you know, situations and things you need to protect in a different way. So, what are some common estate planning mistakes that could negatively impact retirement plans? And how can you best avoid that?
So, one of the best ways to avoid issues in general with when it comes to estate planning is don't DIY. Don't do it yourself. Just don't do it. I've seen so many things over the years, either in the better situation where a client is coming to us and they're alive and they have capacity and we're like, we have a will. We're like, oh, show it to us. It was never signed or it wasn't properly executed. And so it doesn't do anything. It's just a piece of paper. Or unfortunately, sometimes they have passed and we're seeing major issues. We've seen children accidentally disinherited, or maybe there was a change in the law, with retirement accounts and they didn't know that they needed to change their trust. So that's the biggest thing, meeting with a qualified estate planning attorney in your state or even, in more locally in your city. And a lot of estate planning attorneys like us will do free consultations and just kind of get a sense of what it is you might need to do. And even if you don't do something about it now, at least have a game plan. Maybe you'll, set a reminder in 6 months or a year. Hey, let's focus on this because we have seen way too many people try to DIY and it can cause issues, either accidental disinheritance or maybe just it wasn't effective or probate. There's a lot of ways to avoid probate. It doesn't even have to be a trust. For a lot of our clients, especially if they either don't have children or their children are all adults, you can avoid probate with beneficiary designations like transfers on death or payable on death on bank or brokerage accounts. In Florida, we have this really neat kind of deed called an enhanced life estate deed. It's like a payable on death, but for real estate. Not every state has it, but some other states do. And it's really great because you can say in the deed, if something happens to me, my my home or my investment property automatically goes to this person. And I love that planning technique. There's some pitfalls that we have to walk through with the client, but I love that planning technique because it's really economical and it's so effective. It really does work. So just kind of getting that understanding, and talking to someone. And then other easy things to do, legacy contacts on, iPhone or Android or your social media, having all of your assets and your documents in some sort of digital vault to make sure that if something happens, your family, your loved ones know what you have and they know the passwords so they can get access. If you have crypto, they know, how to access it and you don't lose, lots of money or other assets. And I think especially as the world becomes more digital, you have to be able to have everything in one place.
So important. So, let's talk about communication, communicating with family, what you do, like what you suggest, what you've seen. I'll let you take this.
Yeah, all these questions are so good and they're so insightful because these are things that we do think about on a day-to-day basis. So we always offer to our clients, hey, if you're naming someone who's not a client, like often it's spouses, so they're both in the meetings, but if you're naming, say, adult children or siblings or parents, to serve in these roles, do you want us to meet with them and explain what all of this means? And sometimes they take us up on it, clients do, and sometimes they don't. And, it obviously depends on the family dynamics and confidentiality and things like that. But we love when the client says, let's explain everything now while everyone's alive and healthy. So everyone kind of knows what we want to happen and what those roles do entail, especially when it's adult children. It's never fun to say, hey, when we might die, this is what's going to happen. But while everyone's alive and able to ask questions, even like you said, like, hey, mom or dad, why did you name me? Or what do you want me to do in this instance? Or, hey, do you maybe want to name all of us together? Maybe that makes the most sense. And something else, this is a little bit outside of your question, but something else that we really recommend to a lot of clients if they try to start to maybe treat different children in a different way, maybe put more restrictions on one trust over another, we always kind of pull back and say, we understand why you might want to do that, but do you think that by treating beneficiaries differently, it might cause, some confusion or fighting, or cause them to really feel like, hey, what did I do that mom or dad, put these restrictions in place for me and not for my sibling or siblings. And so maybe treating everyone the same might be the best way to do it. And they, because we've done this for so long, between
Yeah.
my law partner and I, over 20 years in trusts and estates, myself 13 years, I've seen a lot. It's like you're like, did you think about this? And oftentimes they really hadn't thought that, that far ahead.
Yeah, that's so key. I mean, because being black and white on piece of paper can be so easy, but then once you add in people, personalities, there becomes conflicts and things. I think actually, you know, trying to smooth that over the best you can. I think you're still going to have conflicts regardless. That's just life. But yeah, communication is key. So the sooner, the
Yeah.
better. And yeah, I'm speaking
Yeah.
from experience. My parents did very well. I'm so grateful for them to have done that, and making decisions at very most difficult time was so clear to us because we already knew. So if
Yeah.
you're somebody who doesn't have one, that just realize that that makes that that much easier for your children.
Yeah, and I think
S-
in your example where, you talked about how your parents had the trust and there was no probate required, that is really the ideal because probate's expensive. In Florida, you usually have to hire an attorney. It's not optional.
wow.
Everything becomes public information, your beneficiaries, your assets, there's a lot that then goes out there into the world. It can take years for assets to be able to fully be moved over. And oftentimes it can be very easily avoided.
Yeah, that's huge. So before we close, I have two questions. The first question, I'm going to ask them together though. The first question is, how does somebody best vet an estate planner for themselves? I know we talked about the free consultation, so take us a little bit further with that. And then for somebody who is just starting out, what is one or two steps they can start doing or thinking about today?
So I think when it comes to picking and selecting an estate planning attorney, I would always recommend, meeting with a few to see who you like because you're going to be much like when you're, starting to work with a financial advisor, you're really going to be kind of showing them a lot of what's going on behind the scenes, your assets, your family, and you want someone who you get along with and who you feel understands you and is really going to take the time to get to know you as well. You also want to make sure that you're picking an attorney or a firm that focuses on estate planning. There's so many attorneys who are like, I do DUIs and I also do wills. And it can get
Mm,
problematic because if you don't focus on an area of law, there might be things that you don't know to ask or things you might miss. Or documents may not be properly done. And so it's really important to find someone, who has experience in that area of law. And I think also finding a firm or an attorney who has really kind of modernized. So making sure that do they have any sort of digital vault where assets can be stored? Are they really making the process as easy as possible for you? And asking in that
mm.
consult, how do you charge? Do you charge flat fee? Do you charge hourly? For our clients who are high net worth or it's more complicated, we still have to do hourly because it's hard to know from the outset exactly what's going to come out of the process. But for our clients who are more, the basic side of things, or even for the high net worth who are doing their basic documents first, we charge flat fees. So you know exactly what it is that you're going to pay. If you pick up the phone and call us, you're not like, oh God, I got to really talk fast. That meter's running, because that's just not conducive, in my opinion, for a great relationship between attorney and client. And, along that same line of someone that you like, do you see them, being someone who will relate to your children, maybe not the same age group by any means, but will they take the time and talk to them and be patient and be compassionate if something, does happen to you down the road? And then as far as getting started, I think, just scheduling consults, reading, and really having, if you have a financial advisor, even talking to your advisor and saying, here's what I have in place right now. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any recommendations on an attorney to meet with? And like I said, the low-hanging fruit of taking out your phone and putting a legacy contact, making sure all your passwords and your assets are in one place Maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet for now, or maybe you get LastPass, to make sure that all your passwords are stored somewhere, so those things don't get lost. Those are things that are very either inexpensive or free that you can do to at least get the ball rolling. And I always tell people, do one thing and then you'll feel confident and you'll be like, oh, now I can do another thing, and start with the easy stuff. If you're kind of getting stalled out and you feel like I've this, people say all the time, this has been on my list for years, and that's so common, but just do something and then that should help you to kind of, get that ball rolling.
I love that. Well, thank you for your time today. How can anybody reach out to you if they have questions? Maybe they were wanting further clarification on a question. How do they reach you?
Absolutely. So there's a couple ways they could reach us. Our website is flourishlawgroup.com, and there's a way to contact us on there. We're only licensed in Florida, meaning we work with the people who live in Florida or who have Florida assets, but we have contacts across the country and outside of the country. So if you reach out to us and we can't help you, we are more than happy to connect you with someone in, the jurisdiction where you live. We also, my email is Lauren Klein at flourishlawgroup.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram. My personal handle, but I do a lot of, estate planning related content, is at lawyer Lauren Klein. And we're also at Flourish Law Group on there as well.
All of those links down in the show notes for listeners to go grab that. And again, Lauren, thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Each week, my goal is to help you get one step closer to retirement so you can be excited for that big day instead of stressed and just hoping it will work out. If today's episode got you thinking about your retirement plans and you're wondering if you're on the right track, I'd love to connect. Let's explore how you can confidently design the retirement you've always dreamed of by booking your free retirement vision session today. In this 30-minute call, we'll clarify your cash flow, what's coming in, going out, explore or refine your retirement dreams, and make sure you're not missing any key areas that may impact or delay you in reaching your retirement goal. Book your call using the link in the show notes below. Don't wait to get clarity. Take that first step toward your dream retirement today.